Chapter 26, Samantha. Well, this is the last time I'm doing a good deed, that's for sure. Now I know why I never do them. What a disaster of a day. This morning, Mr. Wolcott waited for me outside the big house for old geezers. That's a name that makes me smile. Wearing a bright pink bow tie and with a monocle in his eye, like the Monopoly guy wears. Call me Mr. Chips, he said in a loud British accent. All things considered, the name could have been worse. I told him he was doing my class a big favor. I was grateful, sincerely. And when I got to school and introduced Mr. Chips, the other kids were really impressed that I had saved the day. Giovanna said that I was a fantastically awesome, and that made me feel even more fantastically awesome. But then he kept on quoting things like he always does. You're supposed to be a teacher, I reminded him. And what life lessons we learn from the great bard Shakespeare himself, said Mr. Chips, who then added, we know what we are, but know not what we may be. Okay, I said, biting my lip. Even with him quoting things like usual, we arrived at the museum and everything was going well. Mr. Wolcott had been in a wonderful mood. He probably didn't go on trips away from the big old house for geezers, my name for the day, very often. We had been in the museum for about an hour and were in the Native American exhibit admiring their moccasins. I was trying to explain to Giovanna why shoes are the most important fashion accessory and how color coordination was not optional. I think I was finally starting to get through to her, but then my shoulder was tapped. I think something's wrong with Mr. Chips, said Eric. Who? I asked. Mr. Chips, our pretend teacher. I thought he was next to me. I had been keeping Mr. Wolcott by my side all morning. He stood in the middle of the room, his hands balled into fists. He breathed heavily. I quickly walked over to him. Are you okay, Mr. Chips? Him, Mr. Wolcott pointed to a tall, scrawny security guard against the far wall. The guard was an old guy, in his 60s at least. Do you need help? Maybe Mr. Wolcott had some sort of emergency and needed to alert the authorities for assistance. What can I do? I asked, genuinely concerned. Maybe we needed to find a doctor. That man is Jeffrey Burrows, Mr. Wolcott announced, still staring at the guard. My arch enemy. The guard yawned. He didn't notice Mr. Wolcott pointing at him with a long, crooked finger or the angry glare in our chaperone's eyes. That's just a security guard, I said. The scrawny old guy across the room didn't look like he could hurt a fly. Still, Mr. Wolcott seemed pretty worked up. I would recognize him anywhere, Mr. Wolcott declared. His nostrils flared. He took a step forward toward the guard. I stepped in the path of Mr. Wolcott to block his way. He tried to sidestep me, but I moved in front of him again. Let me pass, he demanded. I think you might be mistaken, Mr. Chips. I hoped if I said his teacher name, it might remind him he was supposed to be acting and that teachers didn't start fights with security guards, but I don't think he even heard me. His stare never even left the guard. A few more people were watching us now. I turned my back to them. Have I told you about the love of my life, Franny Bree? He asked. I assured him that I might have heard her name once or twice. It was 50 years ago. Franny and I were set to perform on the London stage. It would be a grand performance of Romeo and Juliet. We would tour Europe, playing the star-crossed lovers, if not for him. His nostrils flared. His heels bounced. His face was tomato red. Mr. Wolcott was always so sweet on his lawn chair. I had never seen this side of him. I planned to propose marriage, he proclaimed. Our happiness was assured, but the night before we were set to leave, I fell ill. Barrow went to London in my place. He stole her heart. I never saw Franny again. Oh, I'm so sorry. I pictured Mr. Wolcott sitting on his lawn chair when I came home from school every day. I'd never seen him with friends or family. Did he have any? Maybe he'd spent half his life regretting his lost love. But you can't blame someone else because you got sick. The cad poisoned me, shouted Mr. Wolcott. True, I cannot prove it, but I know it with every fiber of my soul. He wanted me out of the way so he could take my Franny from me. He averted his gaze from the guard and looked down at me. I have never seen eyes so sad. I wanted to give him a big hug, but that would have been totally weird. Mr. Wolcott looked away for a moment, wiping a tear from his eye. But then, when he turned back around, his expression of despair was gone and once again replaced with anger. His body seemed to vibrate with rage. He stared at the guard and shook his fist. Revenge will be mine. Oh, but are you really sure that's him? I asked. It's been a long time. I patted Mr. Wolcott on the shoulder to help him calm down. He had been speaking so loudly that everyone in the room now stared at us. I threw some of the gawkers a soft smile to assure them that nothing was wrong. I shouldn't have glanced away because Mr. Wolcott quickly stepped around me. He marched toward the guard. Wait, come back, I begged as he stomped across the room. I hurried after him. As he drew closer to the guard, Mr. Wolcott's face grew fiercer and fiercer. So, Burrows, at last we meet, Mr. Wolcott barked between clenched teeth. He puffed out his chest and glared up at the guard, who was a few inches taller than our pretend teacher. The guard threw Mr. Wolcott a puzzled expression. Excuse me? The guard was even older than he had looked across the room. He must have been in his 70s at least. I pointed to his name tag. Look, his name is Clyde, so he can't be Jeffrey Burrows. It's a different guy. But Mr. Wolcott waved me away. Names are easily changed. I pulled Mr. Wolcott's arm to lead him away, but he wasn't budging. Thou art a Castilian king urinal, Mr. Wolcott shouted at the guard. The veins in his neck throbbed and his lips shook. Thou hast no more brain than I have in mine elbows. Please, you're going to ruin everything, I pleaded to Mr. Wolcott. I had no idea what our pretend teacher was talking about, but it was obviously meant to be insulting. Our class secret would be exposed. Everyone would blame me. Oh, I wondered what Daddy would say when I ended up in jail and needed him to bail me out. Good deeds are a lot more trouble than they're worth. You scullion, you rumpellion, you frustillarian, I'll tickle your catastrophe, ranted our half-crazy teacher impersonator, his eyes bulging. The guard had obviously had enough. He held a walkie-talkie and he raised it to his mouth. I was certain that he was going to call for backup, and then a bunch of guys would run into the room and tackle Mr. Wolcott. I hoped Jill was comfortable. But then a funny thing happened. The guard released the button. His eyes grew wider and he lowered his speaker. He stared at Mr. Wolcott. Hey, I recognized that. You're quoting Shakespeare, right? Was that line from Shakespeare's play, King Lear? I read it once, but that was a long time ago. I was a theater major back in the day. Something seemed to click just then. Mr. Wolcott's face relaxed. The wrinkles of rage seemed to disappear. His anger just sort of melted away like an ice cream sundae you've left on the balcony of your high-rise penthouse. He unclenched his fists. He coughed. He smiled. Actually, that line was from his play, Henry IV, Part 2. I performed it in my youth. I did regional theater back home in Kentucky, but nothing too significant, said the guard. I noticed he had a very slight Southern accent. Were you an actor? I am an actor, Mr. Wolcott corrected him. He seemed to grow taller. He lifted his chin. He laughed. He was a completely different person from the madman I saw an instant ago. He was himself again. He looked down at me, laughed, and said to the guard, I'm a teacher, of course. Then he put on his monocle and gazed at the guard with a wry eyebrow lift. See? The guard nodded. Ah, yes, indeed, very academic. Mr. Wolcott nodded. I know. A few seconds later, we were walking away. Mr. Wolcott smiled. A good man, that, he said. I thought he was your arch enemy, I asked. Him? No, Burrows would never mistake Henry IV for King Lear. Those two plays weren't even written in the same decade. I was too relieved to say anything else, so I just nodded. Let's look at the exhibits, I suggested, pointing to a glass display of Native American fur clothing and eager to get his mind onto something else. Meanwhile, my heart beat 1,000,000 miles a minute. It's still beating just as fast now. The rest of the trip went without a hitch, thankfully. Still, it was way too stressful. I was resplendent today, wasn't I? Asked Mr. Wolcott as we walk home from school together. I'm not sure what resplendent means. If it means I was a pain in the neck and almost ruined everything, then yes, he was very resplendent. If only the esteemed Franny Bree had seen me, he says. She would have marveled at my performance. Mr. Walcott always rattles on about meaningless stuff, but maybe much of it isn't meaningless to him. You really loved her, didn't you? He nods. Loved? Past tense. Oh, love never extinguishes completely. Not true love, anyway. The twinkle in his eye dims for a moment, then it quickly rekindles. He laughs, and then he's the same Mr. Walcott I see on his lawn chair every day. He waves goodbye and turns down the entranceway to the home for really old and sometimes baffling guys and gals. Thank you for coming today, I shout after him. And despite everything, I actually mean it. Mostly. All right, chapter 27, Kyle. An eraser bounces off the back of my head. 2 points, yells Brian. Quit it, I'm not playing, I grunt. Brian shrugs and hurls an eraser at Seth, who ducks behind his chair. They're just ignorant. Brian burps. They're just ignorant burping moose. I ignore them and think of yesterday. I look around the class. I still can't believe we made it through the entire field trip without being caught. Yow, yow, yow. But not everyone is celebrating our success. Maggie runs around in a panic and yanks her hair. We need to practice the play. We are not prepared. Friday is in 2 days, she shouts. No one pays much attention to her, but she's right. If we don't practice, our performance will stink. I want to impress our parents Friday night. I want to impress my mom most of all. I don't think I've ever spent so much time on a homework project before. I've been spending a lot of time revising and editing the play, even at home. Not that this is homework because I assigned it to myself. No, I don't think it counts as homework. It should count as homework anyway. The crowd applauds as we act and sing. Maybe I could get used to this homework thing. I'm especially proud of the songs. Everyone loves a musical. But instead of rehearsing, Adam and Lizzie doodle on the floor. Danny and Gavin play paper football. Cooper eats a candy bar. I whistle loudly. Everyone looks at me. Maggie says we need to practice the play, I snap. Maggie throws me a grateful smile. Adam and Lizzie stop doodling and join her, and so do all the other actors. Behind me, Giovanna and Samantha remove a roll of large brown paper from our supply closet to start the set decoration. Brian and Seth continue to hurl erasers at each other and burp. Gosh, do they get sick of goofing off? I think about that last night. Mom was busy changing AJ's diaper and she asked me to take the meatloaf out of the oven. I told her I would in a moment and I was planning to do it at the next commercial break, except I forgot. Mom was pretty steamed, although she was not as steamy as the burnt meatloaf, which Mom made us eat, even though it was charred and black. Marley and Nate wouldn't talk to me the rest of the night. Later, I asked Mom about the promotion and she said she was turning it down. I begged her to reconsider. I told her I'd hold down the fort. She told me that she didn't want the promotion and it had nothing to do with me. I don't believe her. I haven't told her I wrote the class play. I want to surprise her. Maybe if the play is absolutely fantastic, she'll see that she can depend on me. I'll prove to her that I'm good for something. I'll prove that to everyone. A flying eraser grazes my hair. I said I'm not playing, I grumble to Seth. You're no fun anymore, says Brian. I ignore him and join the actors. As the playwright, I need to be prepared to make more script changes and help the director. I should write a part for our hamster, Soda. Soda can play the part of George Washington's dog. I think he had a lot of dogs. Wait, Soda. Oh, I forgot to feed him this morning. That's my job. How am I supposed to take care of my brothers and sisters if I can't even remember to feed a hamster? I hurry to Soda's cage to fill his food bowl with hamster food pellets and to refill his water bottle. The top of the cage is open. That's strange. How are you doing, Soda? I ask with a smile. But when I look inside, Soda is missing. Hey, who has Soda? I ask loudly, scanning the room. No one says a word. Everyone stares at me. I point at the cage. Soda is gone. Who has him? I'm met with silence and blank stares. Who was the last person to go in his cage? I ask. I'm met with more silence, more stares. I fed him yesterday before the field trip. I remember because I lifted him from the cage, stroked his fur, and pretended to throw him at Emmy and then Jasmine. They fall for that joke every time, screaming and cringing. It was funny. It's always funny. After that, I put Soda down on the floor while I poured some food into his dish. Then I put Soda back, right? Then I closed the door, right? Or did I start playing Eraser Wars? You've lost our hamster. Jade sounds very angry. She glares at me. No, of course not, I say. I mean, I couldn't have lost Soda, right? I'm not that completely worthless, am I? My stomach starts twitching with worry. My mouth fills with spit, like I'm going to get sick. I duck down to look under the desk, but there's no Soda hiding there. Help me find him, I shout. My voice fills with panic. Soda's a girl, says Ryan, and then help me find her, I shout louder. But really? Soda is a girl? Everyone in class stops what they were doing to crawl around the floor, checking under desks and in the corners. Even Brian and Seth quit throwing erasers to join the search. Maggie looks in the teacher's desk, opening drawers as if our hamster suddenly acquired the magical power of opening and hiding in drawers, but I suppose we need to check every inch of the room. Cooper looks in the supply cabinet. I check the bookshelf. Nothing. Soda is gone, vanished, and it's all my fault. I really am good for nothing. Chapter 28, Samantha. Oh, I can't believe Soda is gone. Our pet rat, missing, or hamster, or whatever it was. Oh, I always try to ignore the rodent. I touched it once because Mrs. Bryce passed it around class on the first day of school. Everyone had to hold the creature and pet it. And it peed right on my hand. I screamed. It was awful. I washed and washed and washed, yet my hand still smelled like rodent pee all day. I vowed never to get near it again. Who thought that keeping a live rodent in a classroom was a good idea anyway? The mere thought of a rodent in our penthouse apartment gives me the shivers. And now thinking of that creature lurking somewhere in the room, hiding in the shadows of my desk is terrifying. A terrifying picture that I need to get out of my head. I bet I'll have nightmares tonight. What if it pees on me again? I peek in my desk. Thankfully, it's not there. But still, it could run up my pants or something. Oh, that's it. I'm only wearing boots to school from now on. I'll order a new pair or 3 tonight. The other kids in class seem really upset about Soda missing, though. Kyle looks like he's going to cry, which is something I never imagined I'd see. I could ask Daddy to buy a new hamster for the class, a hamster that's specially trained not to run away, has hypoallergenic fur, and only goes to the bathroom on command. But maybe, just maybe, buying a new Soda won't be as awesome as actually finding the old Soda. My legs would still be in danger of a rodent crawling up them. Most important, everyone would still be upset. I thought when Miss Bryce quit, things were going to be perfect. I really did. I could read magazines and help the girls in class with fashion advice. I'd have less homework, which would mean more time for online shoe shopping. I wouldn't have to worry about being yelled at in class, but things aren't working out anything like I thought they would. One bad thing happens after another, and I care about it much, much, much more than I would have ever thought. Maybe we're just not ready for a teacherless class. I mean, take a look at poor Maggie. She's exhausted grading homework, giving assignments, and directing our play. I never want to work that hard at anything. I'm glad I'm not Maggie, that's for sure. Brian and Seth high five each other. Kyle yells his silly yow yow thing. They found Soda under the teacher's desk. Oh, what a relief. Wearing boots every day would be so monotonous. No, wait, never mind. Kyle frowns again. That wasn't Soda under the desk at all. It was just an enormous dust ball. Brian just blew the ball at Gavin and it clings to his cheek. Yuck. Don't they clean these rooms like ever? Our weekly housekeepers would never allow dust bunnies and dirt clods in our penthouse apartment. Aunt Karen wouldn't stand for it. She might not always make the best eggs or lemonade or remember to cut the toast diagonally, but she is a big help. I'm glad she's living with us. Maybe I should tell her that sometime. After all, I'll need her help keeping my boots shiny and polished if we don't find that rodent soon. Samantha? It's Emmy, and she's shuffling over to me slowly. Her jeans are too baggy, and she cuffs them at the bottom. Those are 2 basic jean do not do's. I don't say anything, though, because I'm realizing that people don't want to hear that sort of stuff, even if it's for their own good. Besides, I'm looking at the card in her hand, which she holds up. It was pretty great that you invited Mr. Chips to be our teacher yesterday, she says. It was nothing. He was glad to help. I'm grateful that Emmy doesn't mention the screaming match he had with the security guard and all his strange quotes. Emmy hands me her card. I'm having a party at my house this weekend. I hope you can come. Um, I forgot to give one to you the other day. I thank her for the invitation and she walks back to her friends. I turn the card over in my hand. I know it's only a piece of paper and it's only a party with a bunch of girls I'm not even friends with, but I place the card inside my notebook, careful not to bend the corners. Then I walk over to the other kids and start to help to look for our missing hamster, smiling more than I can remember smiling in a long, long time. And that's the end of Samantha. We'll do Maggie, start with Maggie tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed.